Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're cracking open the hidden architecture of your brain. Specifically, we're looking at how it processes, represents, and securely stores the incredibly vibrant world around us. Your brain is constantly vacuuming up data, right? But how exactly does it recreate that data when the original source is completely gone? Well, let's unpack the mechanics of how we literally see things that aren't actually right in front of us. Try this out with me for a second. Close your eyes. Can you picture your very first day of university? What did the campus actually look like? What specific sights stood out to you? Maybe the sounds of the crowd or even the distinct smells of the hallways. Okay, now switch gears entirely. Imagine the loud, piercing blare of a fire alarm just ringing in your ears. By actively visualizing those specific prompts, you've just brought an entire sensory environment into existence without any of those physical things actually being in the room with you. Pretty wild when you think about it. Okay, let's dive into this. What you just experienced right there, that's mental imagery. It's an experience that closely resembles a real perceptual experience, but it occurs entirely in the absence of the appropriate physical stimuli. It's basically a mental representation of an object or an event that just isn't present. And here's the kicker. This doesn't just apply to memories of things you've seen before. Mental imagery can represent things you have literally never experienced in real life. Like right now, you could vividly imagine what it would be like to travel down the lush, green Amazon River on a little wooden boat, even if you've never been anywhere near South America. It can even conjure up completely fictional things that don't exist at all outside your own mind. Now, when we hear words like imagery or visualization, our minds usually jump straight to pictures, right? Visual sight. But mental representations actually span all sensory modalities. We're talking hearing, smell, and taste too. Think about the melody of your absolute favorite song, or try to hear your national anthem playing in your head right now. You can probably hear the instruments and the vocals perfectly. This just goes to show how our mind is constantly rehearsing and experiencing the world across every single sense. It's essentially a full-body mental simulation, not just some slideshow of pictures. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it begins to explain the how behind our mental filing system. Back in 1969, Allan Paivio proposed this groundbreaking idea called the dual coding hypothesis. It basically suggests that our brains utilize two distinct codes and two totally separate storage systems to handle incoming info. We've got a visual channel, the imaginal system, and an auditory or verbal channel. When we learn or experience something new, that information can be coded and stored in either one of these channels or, and this is absolutely crucial, in both of them at the exact same time. Building on that, think about what happens when we use both of those systems simultaneously. When you combine the visual channel, like actually picturing a dog in your head, with the verbal channel, the spoken or written word dog, you land right in this memorable zone. By overlapping these channels, you're creating two independent memory traces for the exact same concept. Why does that matter? Because if you happen to forget the verbal label, you can still retrieve the visual image, and vice versa. It's an incredibly robust, foolproof way to learn and lock in information. But we have to be careful because each of these mental channels has strict limitations. We humans have a really difficult time simultaneously attending to multiple auditory or multiple visual cues. It's just cognitive overload. Think about a really good learning experience, like a high-end nature documentary. Stunning visuals engage your visual channel, while a steady spoken narration engages your verbal channel. They complement each other, they don't compete. In contrast, a bad presentation forces you to watch a speaker while simultaneously trying to read a wall of bullet points. It's just pure overload. On a fun side note, this is exactly why this very explainer deliberately avoids overwhelming your visual channel. We're balancing clear, focused visuals with my narration so you can actually absorb it all. Let's move to and see how this builds. We know we have these visual and verbal channels, but how is that data literally formatted inside the brain? Well, our mental representations generally fall into two distinct formats: analog codes and symbolic codes. Analog codes are representations that retain the main perceptual features of what's being observed out in the physical environment. Symbolic codes, on the other hand, represent knowledge in totally arbitrary forms. They don't perceptually resemble the concept they're representing at all. To really lock in this concept of analog codes, think about observing a tree or a flowing river. When you look at these in the real world, your mental representation retains its actual physical characteristics. Your mind's eye creates an analog, a parallel mental replica basically, that hold on to the shape of the trunk, the green of the leaves, and the physical 3D space it occupies. Inside your head, it looks exactly like the physical stimuli it represents. On the completely opposite end of the spectrum, we have symbolic codes. Take the numeral 9, for example. This curved shape with a little loop on top arbitrarily represents the concept of nineness. There's absolutely nothing about that physical shape that inherently looks like the quantity of 9 separate objects. Just like the digital numbers on a watch display time arbitrarily, our mental representations of words and numbers primarily exist in this symbolic code. These symbols only hold meaning because we've all collectively agreed on the deeper concepts they represent. Deep, abstract concepts like justice and peace, they don't have physical shapes or colors. They are best and strictly represented in our minds as these symbolic codes. So the crucial point is we have these two neat, orderly systems. We have our visual and verbal channels, and we have analog and symbolic codes holding our reality together. But what happens when these strictly separated sensory channels and codes suddenly bleed into one another? Like, what happens when the brain's meticulous filing system beautifully and sometimes chaotically crosswires itself? Well, that brings us to synesthesia. This is a genuinely fascinating neurological condition where the stimulation of one sense automatically and completely involuntarily stimulates several other senses. Instead of your sensory channels working in neat isolation, they trigger these massive domino effects. For people with synesthesia, they might literally hear sounds and see vivid shapes or patterns exploding in their visual field. They might physically feel a distinct object in their own hands just by hearing a certain noise across the room. They might feel a physical touch on their own body when watching someone else being touched. Or, incredibly, they might actually taste specific foods in their mouth just by seeing or reading a specific word. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what we've been talking about, marrying the idea of symbolic codes with sensory crosswiring. You see, for a synesthete, arbitrary symbolic codes, like numbers, aren't just abstract concepts floating in the void. A person with a specific type of synesthesia will inherently, automatically, and permanently see the symbolic number 5 as the color red. Every single time, they will always see the number 8 as green. The arbitrary symbol has been forcefully and permanently fused with a highly specific visual analog code right there in their mind's eye. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought that brings all of this together. We've learned that our brains construct our reality using carefully separated sensory channels and arbitrary symbolic codes. But we've also seen that the brain can absolutely bend these rules, blurring the lines between what we see, what we hear, and what we know. So I ask you to ponder this. If abstract concepts like justice or peace exist in our minds primarily as arbitrary, formless symbols, but our brains have the capacity to forcefully merge our physical senses with those symbols, what does justice actually taste like? Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the mind's eye. I really hope this structured look at our inner workings has sparked your curiosity to learn even more about the incredible power of your own brain. Catch you next time.